be writing about that same kind of thing 10 years from now.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Yeah. Sarah?
I have boxes of handwritten notebooks that I've carried around with me for years for whatever reason, because I'm a bit of a hoarder. And it's a lot of it's in pencil, so some of it's faded. But I'll go back through and I'll read it, and I can tell what I was being influenced by as I wrote these stories. You know, like you're saying with the Cure and stuff, like what I was reading, what I was into, like the age where you wrote it is obvious too. Like, I mean, you know, when all my characters were like 14 years old when I was writing, I was 14, you know? So my characters aged up with me, although, you know, but it's pretty funny reading some of this. Some of it's not bad. I read some of it. I'm like, you know, I kind of knew how to put a sentence together at least, but I mean, none of it is a fully formed story, like a fully formed book.
It's sort of like little bits and pieces, and in my case, angsty poetry, which is awful. So,
oh my God, I went through the poetry phase too, but I don't mind my poetry, but yeah, they're few and far between, tucked away.
I look back, and I don't want you to read that, but I also don't want you to read what I'm writing now.
Right, okay.
Because it does
Are
seem
you
like
in the right job, Dad?
I think so, because I don't think I'm alone in this, that every time I start a new thing, it almost feels like you're starting from scratch, and you're like, how do I do this again? And I think maybe where I'm improving is certainly in the editing process. So I'm a faster drafter now, but I don't know if it's improving from the first draft. I think is where the editing and the polishing that comes later is where I'm sort of evolving as a writer.
You're able to pick up on the things that you know aren't working. You're not quite as attached to them, maybe, as you know when you hear your first book. You're like, I don't want to lose any of this. I know it's also important, and then you're like, no, that's really not that entire scene. That character can just go. Don't care.
It's a lot easier to be objective about it and to rip stuff out that isn't working.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So, Khan, I'm going to direct this next question to you then. So, when you finished your first book, did you have a clear idea of where you wanted to go next? Now, obviously, you kind of, you know, you said you subbed and it was an unfinished book and then it didn't kind of go, but you had the Circus Infinite and you're like, right, did you know where you wanted to go next with it? Did you, this time around, lay any of the groundwork for querying or publishing? Did you know where you wanted it to be?
Oh, for sure. I knew I wanted to pursue traditional publishing. And of course, I was smarter this time. I mean, there's so many resources now that weren't available to us back in the 90s. So I researched presses and agents and the querying process and read writers' blogs, and I'm still part of a Discord of writers who are in the querying trenches, which is something I wish I had back then. But anyway, so I did have a pretty clear idea of the path I wanted to pursue and where I wanted to go. And Angry Robot was actually one of my top choices of publisher, for particularly for this book. I thought it would be a good home for them. It turns out to be true. But I didn't know that they did this, that they had this open submission period. And I was in the middle of still querying agents when I found out that there was this open submission period. It was an Absolute Right forum, and somebody said the deadline, and it was like the next day. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna send this in and see what happens. And then they ended up taking it. There was a round of before they made an offer on the book. I got essentially an edit letter. Nothing in writing. I had a Zoom call with the acquisitions editor, Gemma, and she ran through a list of things that they wanted addressed. And I went ahead and did those edits and made those revisions and sent in the new version, and then they took it. So that's how that happened. But before, and I was still querying them. I didn't have an agent.
And did you have a feeling, like, so when they said to you, do these edits, was there any kind of if you do these edits, we're really interested, or was it kind of a wing and a praise, like there was no guarantee at the end of that? I know there never is, but
there was no guarantee, but there was a little. Maybe I was reading into it. I don't know, but I definitely got a feeling of nudge, nudge, wink, wink. We're really interested in this book. and ultimately, the thing is, though, like what made me just go for it is that I agreed with the edits. And it was all things like there was nothing that was radically changing the story. It was all more. They like wanted more of various things.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to see more of the romantic relationship. They wanted to see more of the world. They wanted the villain to be scarier. They wanted the side characters to be further developed. So it was all, and so I was like, yeah, I can do that. And then I thought, well, if I do these edits, even if they don't go for it, I'll still end up with a stronger book in the end than hurrying with. So
yeah, that's definitely a really positive way to look at it. So okay, no, that's interesting. Well, but at least so you've slightly different. You're much a smaller press, and then more sort of traditionally with your short stories. So you then had a bit of a different experience, and you're saying, well, did you write your short stories, for example, for a particular submission or for an anthology? So you thought, right, I've got this basis, that's what I'm doing it for. Or were you writing them because you thought, I just want to write this, and then sort of saw where it fits? So your situation may be slightly different if you can just pick something from what I said.
Sure. Well, I'll talk about, so I am a novelist at heart. I love long form, but when I had my second child, I realized that novels were probably not in my future for quite a few years, and I knew that I would get incredibly depressed if I stopped writing. So part of my process and what I feel has brought me further and further into the publishing world was I said, all right, that's it, short stories, and I'm going to try to submit them to Writers of the Future, which is open to basically amateur writers. If you win, you get into the anthology, but they also will take you down and help you network and do a beautiful award ceremony for you. I love the Writers of the Future program. It's great. So spoiler. So I submitted one of my stories placed, and then from there I started finding out about more markets. I realizing that my writing had reached a point where it was it could get published professionally. I learned to write to 5,000 words or less because yes, there are places that take more than that, but really you've got such a better shot if you can write a 5,000 word or less story. And I just continued to teach myself that, and that it's brought me into a lot of places where people know me or have heard my story on Escape Pod. And at the very least, there's oh, I loved that story. I'm so glad we got that story in the anthology. Oh, you're writing a novel that's in that same world. I'd like to hear more about it. So this is obviously kind of diverging away from what we said, more into the networking and entering the publishing world. But that's been my positive experience thus far.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So Sarah, what about yourself? And then
my story is very similar to Khan's. I submitted to Angry Robot through the open submission because I saw it on. I think it's where I saw that they were having that window. The difference though is that I had written this book basically in the NaNoWriMo month. I wrote the first half one November and then the second half the next November, and had been working on it for a couple of years. And my husband said to me, he's like, you should probably, he's like, I think this is ready to go out. And he's like, why don't you think about self-publishing? Because he had met a bunch of people whose they had books self-published and were, making money or whatever. And I'm like, oh, maybe, I don't know. Because I've been talking for years about wanting to get a book published, wanting to be published. And he was probably tired of hearing about it and me not actually doing anything about it. So this is right during the pandemic hit. And I was editing this book with the idea that I was going to self-publish it. And then the Angry Robot open submission came up. And I was like, you know what? It's done. I edited it. I finished it. I'm just going to submit it. What the hell? See what happens. So I yeeted it out into the sun, and they got back to me. And it was the same thing. I talked to Gemma, and she was like, we want it if you can cut like 50,000 words out of it.
Wow. What was the original count?
It was like over 150,000 on the
Okay.
book. It ended up being it's around like 120, I think, in the end of it. It was, and I was like, I said, okay, even though I was like, how in God's name am I going to do that? But it's actually not hard to cut. I found in the long run, it's easier to cut than probably add things. I mean, it's just a different kind of hard, I suppose. I don't know. But that was it. And then I didn't have an agent, and I just got an agent not a month ago. So I don't know. My story is not spending years in the trenches querying and trying to find people. And I'm just like, I think I just hit the right thing at the right time. And got
I also
in.
love the fact to hear those. It's like that, you know, it starts coming from just different places here. You're like, oh yeah, I'm going to self-publish this, and Khan's like, I want to be with Angry Robot, and you both came from such different places, and yet you ended up in the same place. And I think that's great though, because there's not just one path for this. It's you know, people can have different stories, and you know, but the success is still the same, and I think that's great.
I really didn't want to self-publish. I admit I didn't want to do it. I was like, I don't have the capacity to do this, to self-publish. I really didn't. I could have put it out on Amazon and just left it. Nothing would have happened with it, because I just don't know how to hustle to sell myself, you know. So it was lucky. I've always wanted traditional publishing. So
I have a question here, specifically for Dan. It's from some strange person called RWW Green.
Every time, Rob. Every time.
Why is Dan wearing a shirt? That's not what I was promised.
Disappointing us all, huh?
Dan, do you want to answer that question?
Yes, my summer body is not ready yet because it's still winter.
He needs his tan. He has to get his
that seems
I need more than a tan, though.
I think that's perfectly reasonable. Okay. So, Dan, I have another question for you, which is not about your shirt or your summer body. You'll be relieved to hear. Which was, were you prepared for the reality of the publishing world? Do you think you knew enough going into it?
You kind of, because this wasn't my first book. This is my third book. So the first book that I had that I started to write was this epic science fiction fantasy book. And I started at a time when we were, you know, you had to submit in paper and pay, you know, £100 to send this bloody parcel off. I never spent that, don't worry. But it was difficult. And I ended up in Australia about the same time that I finished it, and I started querying sort of traditionally, because I wanted to be traditional as well. I mean, I didn't know enough about self-publishing. I certainly wouldn't have been very good at it. So I wanted to sort of go the traditional route. So, I mean, at that time, I think Twitter was sort of coming into its own, and the writing community was sort of building on there. So I ended up towards the end of that querying process, because I spent years querying that. And the one thing I didn't learn was that you should just move on to the next book. I just kept rewriting, reworking, and resubmitting this book. But on Twitter is where I found the community, and I started just sort of listening to people and seeing what they had to say from, you know, the writers around me who were getting deals, and then what they were going through, and also the people who'd been around for a while and what they were, you know, dealing with 2 or 3 books in. So I think by the time I got eventually, after, you know, nearly 2 decades of working on my own stuff, when I got into publishing officially, and I got my agent, Sarah Megabo, and then I got the deal, I think I was prepared. And that was, you know, Twitter can be a hell site, and it certainly is more so now. But
yes,
the writing community on it is fantastic. And it's
wholeheartedly agree.
It's a wonderful place to learn about the industry.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Would anyone else like to sort of add to that? Just in terms of, you know, were they ready? Is there anything that really, I suppose it's kind of moving on to the second question a little bit, but kind of like when you got in there, was there anything you just went, oh my God, I didn't know that was going to happen? Would anyone like to contribute to that?
Thing I wasn't expecting was the lag time between a first book and a second book. Like getting a second deal, I'm surprised at how how long it's taken or how difficult it is, and not just for me personally, but for like everybody I know. Like it just seems like I thought once you get published, once you get your foot in the door, then it just everything goes from there. Like just cascades into your trilogy and your your next series and whatever. And that's not how it works. And it's a bit disappointing, but it's also, it's just, I don't know, the only thing you can do is just keep writing the next thing. And
I mean, do you think there might be an element though of that? I mean, the publishing at the moment is still kind of reeling from the pandemic to an extent. I mean, there was a long lag, things weren't happening. Potentially in a way where self-publishing actually took the edge over traditional publishing, because self-published authors were able to adapt really quickly in a way that TradPub wasn't able to do, and there's a little bit of a shift around things now. So do you think there's any of that is an element of just a delay from COVID, or do you think that is just the way the publishing industry is? And that's a genuine question.
I think it's the publishing industry more so, just because you got to have the numbers basically, and when you're a mid-lister, you don't necessarily have the kind of numbers that people go crazy about. So but it's like, I mean, most authors are mid-listers, so it's like you gotta build their audience and put a little effort into those, and not just focus on top tier authors, or pretty soon you're not going to have many authors out there. I don't know. It seems more of a feature than a bug. Like, I don't think 2020 caused it, but I do think the sequel problem has a lot to do with people being reluctant to invest in a series if they think it's not going to happen. You know what I mean? But
then, as you say, they also need to put some energy behind it in order for it to take off. So,
I love this first book in the series, and the second book doesn't come out for another 10 years, or it never comes out, or so. Or half the people want to read it that they read the first book.
Okay, fair enough. Anybody want to add to that? Or are we happy to move on to the next question? So we've got a couple of questions here. So I'll come back to that one. Question from Yvette: who or what or how is the best way to dip a toe into writer Twitter, or the writing community on Twitter, which kind of, I suppose, leads into one of our questions about networking and personal connections and how important they are. So Dan, I'll start with yourself.
Well, I think the writing community hashtag is a pretty good one, because you get a lot of people using that. I would follow your favorite authors, people you like to read. You'll probably find a lot of them on Twitter. You'll see through their connections who they are following and retweeting and engaging with, and just follow it through there, and then you say goodbye to your life, because you'll just go down the rabbit hole. But it's a good rabbit hole, so
No, yeah, I found writing Twitter to be a really supportive, lovely place, I must admit. So okay, so Khan, what do you think then about how important sort of networking and personal connections, how important have they been to your writing career or your publishing career? Oh, is Khan frozen?
Oh, did Khan freeze?
I think we might have lost him.
We may have lost. Okay, right, we shall see if he becomes a lack of motion. We'll see if he starts to move again. Elise.
I would say community has always been a very big part. Community networking, all of those things. I have for me, I have a background in theater and performing arts. I was raised by an actress, and so getting in front of people and exuding emotions and talking is much better than any kind of marketing material I will ever write. So that's been big for me. So winning Writers of the Future, I went down and met 11 other authors who were kind of at a very, very similar stage in their careers, just kind of getting started, just starting to write professionally on the short fiction range. I am good friends with many of those to this day. We're in a critique group. We read each other's stuff. We try to drag each other to conferences. I don't think I can quantify or put a dollar mark on how valuable it is to have people who are doing what you're doing, willing to share what they know, happy to share their mistakes, happy to warn you from someone they had a bad experience with. All of those things of looking out for each other is big. That's more community than specifically networking. As far as networking, I feel like I have been very blessed to encounter just one kind person per huge conference who says, hey, can I introduce you to a few people? And then just literally attaching myself to those people and following them around. Writers are one of the most generous communities I've met. And that, hey, I'll make the circle wider, let me step over and introduce you to all the people here. I am astonished by how many of those folks I've met. So that's made a very big impact, very big difference to me. And not being shy to attach yourself to someone kind, because they probably don't mind.
Okay, that's good advice. Thank you. Sarah, what about yourself? I mean, I'm going to change that question up slightly, if that's all right. I know that you've said you met people and things. So do you think that your networking and your sort of other writers have remained as important to you as you've gone through your career? Have they become more important to you?
I've made the mistake of not reaching out to a community when I was writing all these years. I wrote in a vacuum for many, many years. I didn't go to author conventions, writing conventions, because I wasn't a writer. I wasn't published. So I was like, I don't belong there. I'd feel weird. I was always, I'm like, why would I go to a writing convention? I don't have anything published. I'm trying to get published. Writers go to writing conventions. And I didn't realize that writers, readers, unpublished writers, everybody goes to writing conventions who have interest in writing. And I mean, and I kick myself now, having missed out on all those connections for over years. I met all my current author friends through Twitter and through Angry Robot. We have a whole group that gets together and chats. We've gone on a retreat together, and I count them as friends, and none of that would have happened if I hadn't gotten published with Angry Robot. But you don't have to be published to do that, is the big lesson I learned. But I also met my agent at a convention. And the connections, the networking, it's that's how you do it. I mean, you're going to meet people and they're going to help you along in your career. That's how you get ahead, basically.
Yeah. Dan, anything to add from that?
Yeah.
Khan's back. Yay.
I'm back, yay.
You're back.
Right. So I don't know what happened. Dan was talking and everything froze, and then my computer crashed.
I'm so sorry.
Dan.
Nice going, Dan.
I had to restart. I had to reboot. I had to do the whole thing. It was very strange. Anyway, sorry.
That's okay. We thought maybe your internet had actually turned up to sort your internet. So Dan, you were saying.
Yeah, I was just going to add to Sarah's comment about networking in person. The thing that led me to getting my agent basically was I started writing for Fantasy Faction, which is this popular blog. And I started off doing, I think I did a couple of articles, and then I started doing book reviews, and then I started interviewing the authors of those books. And then one of those was a guy called Mike Martinez, whose books are amazing. And he had an agent, Sarah Megabo. And so I think through him, I just said, do you think I could get an interview with Sarah? And then we developed a relationship that way, whereas Sarah would then send me some of her clients' upcoming works, and then I'd review it. And if, I liked it, I wrote a review of it and did an interview, and we built it up from there. And I think it was over maybe a period of 7 years of sort of networking in that way that I then had this idea. I ran it past Sarah. She was like, that sounds really cool. Send it to me when you're done, which was helpful because I'm terrible at queries. So
query letters are the worst.
Yeah. But it's kind of, I think I didn't expect it. That's one thing I didn't expect, to play such a big role in publishing and getting published. It isn't kind of who you know, but it really helps to network and meet other people and learn things and develop those relationships however you can.
Yeah, even from the perspective sometimes of knowing what a particular publishing house or agent is looking for in that moment, and you might go, oh, well, that fits me really well, and that might be right person, right time, and I think that's probably true. So, Khan, is there anybody for you, like any particular individual or group who played a significant part for you in terms of either helping you get published or just helping you with your writing?
The Discord group that I was part of, or I'm still part of, although I'm not as active as I had been, was really great. And I got invited to join it through somebody that I met on Writer Twitter. And so it was, I mean, I hadn't been seeking it out exactly. I mean, I first of all, I'll just say right up front, I am a terrible networker. Like I'm bad at it. I am sometimes often dense when it comes to like interpersonal politics and like all that kind of stuff. Like I don't really play that game. Like I approach it as like I just want to make writer friends. Like that's my deal. So anyway, a writer friend that I made on Twitter invited me to join this Discord that they were running, and it was all folks who were querying. So we were all like at the same level, you know, pretty much. Like nobody was just starting out writing. We all had completed manuscripts, and everybody was querying. Not all the same genre, and I can't. It was less about. It was more that feeling of community and having solidarity and having people going through the same process and understanding the frustrations and that kind of like emotional support that was super helpful to me, more so than craft issues. But
okay, so that's interesting. Again, I think we're seeing a lot of, you know, people saying Discord and Twitter and going to conventions and then writing on blogs and different and doing reviewings, and obviously like Elise yourself, you know, the future writers and the competitions, and again just a huge number of different avenues into it. But I think the theme that, and I'm sure you guys will agree, is that actually just having that a bit of support, that background, having someone to sort of ask advice and feel welcome. And I think the writing community is a really welcoming space. I found it to be in a way that I know it's a bit corny, but I kind of feel like I found my people. I know that's a kind of, it's a trite saying in some ways, but you know, I have felt at home in a way that I haven't in other, you know, jobs or careers, or, you know, people are genuinely rooting for you. Not that, oh yay, but behind your back kind of thing that you seem to get in lots of other environments. And I think that's a great thing about the community. Somebody has asked about, sorry, I've lost the question. Sorry. Oh, so a question from Wilson Goodson about beta readers. So I suppose we could tack that on to, you know, have other authors, you know, been good beta readers for you, or has anybody used sites or anything that gives them, you know, particular beta readers? I know they exist out there. So does anybody have any tips about beta readers?
I could use some. So
my whole thing was trying to get my husband to read my stuff, and he reads really, really slow. So I found a friend of mine who reads like a book a day, and I had her read it for me, because up until that point, I did not like people looking at my work, which is ridiculous considering I wanted to be published. But I was like, I was never comfortable finding beta readers. I'm like, if I can't figure it out myself, you know, whatever. It was stupid, but
yeah. Well, no, listen, I feel your pain. I asked my boyfriend to read my short story the other day, and I said, "What do you think?" He went,
it was words.
Like, okay, what does that mean? Good. It's like, I don't even know why I bother asking him. That's not any. I can't use that feedback. So anyway, sorry.
I just wanted to add that, you know, I have gotten feedback. I mean, getting outside feedback is a super important part of the process. And I have to date had writer friends read things, and you know, with one book, not The Circus Infinite, but a different book, I just posted on to my Facebook friends, hey, would anybody want to read this book and give me some feedback? And I had a questionnaire like for them to answer and everything, and that was somewhat helpful. I think what would be useful for me though, and what I would love to do, is get beta readers that are strangers. But I don't really know how to do that. So I think
there are some paid services. There's some Facebook groups that do it, but I don't know how great the return is on it. I've heard a few people say, yeah, it worked for me, and other people went, didn't really happen, or there was no consensus, because I think sometimes they're not not necessarily genre targeted. You know, the people who want to read books, but they're maybe not fantasy or not horror or not science fiction. And so if they're not your target audience, beta readers, feedback can actually be quite unhelpful because they're actually not who your market's going to be. So I think that's a mixed bag. Does anybody else, Elise or Dan, want to jump in on that before we move on?
I was just going to advocate for someone who, for a good friend who is not necessarily a writer reading it, because someone who knows you and knows maybe your weaknesses or your tendencies as a writer and also your strengths as a writer has more potential to really dig in and say, this is a strength of yours. You could flesh it out here more. This is something that you have a very bad habit of doing. Would you please stop using the word only? It's driving me nuts. And sometimes it really helps to have someone who knows you. The critique might feel a little more direct and a little less stinging. Critique's always going to hurt. And the only way that to get past that is to do it more. So I gathered people. I tempted them over to my house for breakfast. We had breakfast together and we critiqued each other's stuff once a month for over a decade. I've done it online. I've done it in coffee shops. I learn which person gives critique that never resonates with me. And when I get their critiques, I just politely say thank you. And then I might just shelve the entire document. And then there's others where I will pore over their notes because I can see they have good intent toward me. They want the story to be better. They want me to write my story, not their story. And those ones, like, hold on to those ones. They're gems. It does take a while to find them, but they are there.
Someone's saying on the chat there that beta readers by joining groups on Facebook with fans for content and then sort of did like a Google form and then sort of vetted people before sending the books, which might work quite well. Okay, Sarah, I'd like you to tell me what your best and worst part of being published was.
The best part is seeing my book in bookstores and in libraries, because I spent a lot of time in a library when I was a kid. And I mean, the idea of having my book on a library shelf was just a dream, you know, it's like the impossible dream. So to see it there is pretty exciting. In bookstores especially too. It's like, you know, just going in and having my sister send me photos when she's out and about, or my friends send pictures, or just they post pictures, is so exciting.
It's like an Obsidian in the wild.
Yeah, it's like the worst part has been the level of anxiety I have felt waiting for the thing to come out, waiting for reviews to come in. The first couple of reviews that weren't good, that were just that's devastating. And I've stopped reading reviews. Our friend Rob Green was always like, do not read your reviews. And it took me a while to figure
that was a good Rob
out.
impression, actually. It sounded just like him.
I'm like, I don't go anywhere near my reviews anymore. I look at the numbers of reviews or ratings or whatever, which is the only thing you can really look at. It just pushes your book up higher in the algorithm the more ratings you have and whatever. But the reviews, not everybody's gonna like it. It's fine. And it took me a while to really wrap my head around that. But yeah, the crippling anxiety is probably the worst part of being published. But, you know, that's just normal life. So I don't know.
Khan, what about you? Best and worst?
The best, well, like Sarah said, seeing my book in bookstores, and I saw it at an airport bookstore once.
Ooh, kudos.
I was like, achievement unlocked. But then the other best part has been like meeting other writers. I feel like I'm hesitating to say this because I don't want to like give an impression that like writers are cliquey or whatever, but I feel like when my book came out, it was like I was shown the secret handshake and like the curtain was opened and it was like I mean, so and it's opened up. I've made a bunch of new friends that I hope will, you know, be lifelong friends. You know, we'll see if I irritate them too much. So that's been great. So all that has been great, and just having a book published, it's you know, a childhood dream that's happened. it's weird because it's kind of like getting so before I was published, I was like, I'll be really happy in my life if I just get one book published.
Right.
But the thing with getting published is it's like getting your first hit of a really good drug. And and suddenly you want more. And like I'm still writing and I still have other books. And the crazy thing is, like, I feel I have a book on sub now. I actually have 2 books on sub now. I won't get into like super. I won't do all that, but basically, the point I'm trying to make is, since The Circus Infinite was published, I've written 2 other novels, and my writing's gotten better. Like the prose has gotten better, the plot structure's gotten, like, everything about like my craft is better now than what's in The Circus Infinite. And so I feel like I've got more to show the reading world, and it's so dependent on other people saying yes. And yeah, I mean, I had hoped that I'd have another book coming out this year, and even if I sell both of these books that are on sub now, they might not come out until 2025.
Right.
That's a long wait, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, so it's maybe the second half of 2024 if an offer comes in tomorrow, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
okay.
So the best part is having the book out.
And there's a lot, and the bad part is all the waiting and dependency on other people.
Wanting to get the next book out.
Yeah. Okay. Elise, what do you think? Best and worst for you?
I think the best, I want to echo a couple things Khan's already said, which is the amazing writing community, and almost being brought to tears by how kind various people have been to me. But also, speaking of bringing to tears, getting someone to cry in public at a reading. Oh my gosh, that felt good.
Right away.
Like, that was amazing. And so knowing that my writing could touch people. I mean, at that reading, I not only had someone cry, I also had someone get angry at me. So it was really quite a
evoking
dramatic,
the emotions there, were you?
I was really, I mean, the actress is happy, but I mean, wow, it was my first reading, and oops, sorry, I just hit my microphone. So that was definitely a high. The low, also to echo what Khan says, gosh, that waiting, and it's not defined. It's not like work 6 months on this and then it will take 2 months after this before this thing happens. It's like, oh, that could, you could hear back in a week, you could hear back in 6 months. And I'm like, how do I plan my life? How do I adjust my expectations? How do I not get depressed when it's 3 times longer than I thought it would be?
And do you have answers to any of those questions?
No. I mean,
I thought we were going to get pearls there.
Yes, I do have wonderful friends in the writing community who you can go talk to about it, because and you can go out and have a beer with at the next conference and just talk about like how crappy this all is, and then you feel better. Okay. Somehow you feel better, and then you get enough of a lift from that conversation, from that community, that you are going to go back and sub again. So I think that's huge.
Mm-hmm. All right, Daniel, worst and then best. So let's finish on something positive with this one. So your worst thing about it, and then the really best thing that you felt about getting the books out there.
I mean, everything everyone said is accurate. There is, lots of waiting. There's lots of anxiety. There's lots of comparing yourself to other people, and feeling that you should be at a certain stage alongside them. And you just can't do that because you're all doing different things in different places. But I have to say the thing, and I came out during the pandemic, and then my second book came out during the supply chain shortage. So, but not seeing
you're like a bad penny then.
Yeah, not seeing it on as many shelves in the UK at places like Waterstones as I thought might be the case. Now, there have been wonderful places like in the Trafford Centre, Waterstones. There's a bookseller called Brian, who's just been a huge champion of most of ours, I think, at Angry Robot. And then sort of spread the word to his connections. And so that's one of the best things that's come out of it, is seeing that. And I have to say, to finish on a high, I went to New York recently and saw it in every Barnes and Noble, or pretty much, that we went into, and that's a hell of a thing. And Barnes and Noble are fantastic for science fiction.
Noble are fantastic.
But working with Angry Robot, so finding a publisher that sort of is fun to work with, and we've done these events with them in the past, and they're just such a great team, and it's it's a joy to have worked with them. I have heard horror stories from other people at other publishers who've not experienced, they've sort of been siloed, they feel cut off. That's not the case. And we've established this sort of, we're mostly Angry Robot writers in our little group, with a few other brilliant writers coming in, and to have that support behind you when you launch into a pandemic is a brilliant thing. But just generally, they're a delight to work with. So it's nice to know they're out there, and it was worth it all this time to find a traditional publisher who sort of had your back.
Yeah, someone who's doing it right. That's great to hear. Thank you. All right, I'm just going to check just going to check the chat a wee bit here to see what people are saying and if there's any other questions for us before we move on. Okay, I don't know if there anybody is 100% qualified or wants to answer this, but I'll put it out there for you. How can you approach networking as a neurodivergent writer? People who find networking very challenging and they're wiped out after doing it in person or online. I don't want to put anybody on the spot there to obviously have to certify or anything, but if anybody has an answer to that, then please, by all means.
I'm not sure. I'm terrible at talking to people, and it terrifies me, like reaching out to people. And I don't know if that means I'm neurodivergent or what, but that's just something that I've always had a problem just approaching. And I don't know if it's not in your wheelhouse, it's okay. People are always kind. I mean, and you shouldn't be afraid to approach people. Don't think of it as a job, I guess. I mean, just try and look at it as something that should be enjoyable. It shouldn't be hard. It shouldn't be like stressful for you. You should, and if just talk to somebody on Twitter, like do it, just, engage them. And after a while, maybe direct message them. Don't, it starts slow, I guess, don't make yourself stressed about it.
Rob Green's advocating lots of naps, which seems to be good advice. What I would say to that is, I know that, online might feel safer, etc. Certainly, I know at conferences, people tend to be very welcoming. And I know some writing conferences have done it well, some have done it badly. But certainly Glasgow 2024, that's something we're very, very aware of. And things like quiet rooms are going to be available. So if you were neurodivergent and you wanted to come along and you think, what if I need a break? What if I'm not coping? That is something that should be considered by conventions, and it is something that is certainly being discussed by ourselves. Obviously, the details of that will follow in time, but it is something we're very aware of. So we would hope that neurodivergent people would feel confident and know that we have plans in mind to make them feel more welcome, more safe, and take a time out if that's actually what's needed. So I would say, not necessarily neurodivergent myself, but look at what conventions have in place to support you. What are people talking about? Look for other neurodivergent authors and writers. There are lots of groups, and just see how they approached it, and maybe ask for some advice. A lot of neurodivergent authors are quite open about that on Twitter, and so they would be good people to approach, I think. Does anyone have anything to add to that? Sorry if I swooped in a wee bit there.
I was just thinking about how some conferences have meetups specifically for individuals of all sorts of different interests, whether it's people with families or people with pets. I mean, it amazing number of different kinds of groups, and finding like-minded people to just give you something in common to talk about can really help break the ice as well.
Yeah, everybody loves cats. Cats on Twitter. Right. That's always a good start. Yeah. Realize that. Okay. Someone, David C's asking if we have any recommendations for writer conferences, either in the UK or the US. I'd say Glasgow 2024, really, realistically, would probably be a really good bet. EasterCon, FantasyCon in the UK, anybody has any other US ones they might want to recommend.
The Boscone is a big one. I've not been to it yet, but I know lots of people who really enjoy it. It's a pretty good one. The Capricorn in Chicago I just went to, which was a nice local con, a lot of authors, a lot of people there. That was fun. You know, you can just look, you know, Google it. You'll find 1,000 conferences, and find one that's convenient to you first, you know, and, you know, start that way. But
yeah, CornCon's also making a comeback this year in November, I think. I was so subtle about that there. Did you see the way I just snuck that right in? Here's a lovely comment here from Shelley Jones, who says, I've been in quite a drought lately, so many rejections, and this honest discussion of the challenges of the publication process is really helpful. I'm so glad I tuned in. Thank you. So nice to have people out there that will be helping. It's appreciated. Thank you very much, Shelley. And we very much hope that the rejections turn into accept? No, that's not the right word. It's a good thing I'm not a writer. Acceptances. There we go. I knew that was in there somewhere. All right. Sorry, I'm just trying to scroll up here. Okay, I think I've seen all of them. Yeah. Who hates cats?
I know. I saw that. I was like,
what?
uh-oh.
Okay, we said no hate speech. I don't know if that word was a boo. I'm thinking about it right now. That's not okay. Right. Okay. It's another open questions at the moment. So I'm going to move on to our next one. Which is, I guess, what are you working on at the moment? Wilson has apologized. Okay, we'll let it slide. Okay, Dan, what are you working on, if you can tell us?
I can't tell you. I'm working. Yeah, you should.
Okay, well, thanks.
You knew you shouldn't have come to me first. I've been working.
How would I know that?
You know.
I didn't.
I've been working.
I thought you might slip up and tell me.
I've been working on. So one of the things that happened during the pandemic was that I won the chance to write for someone's IP, and I've been doing that for nearly 3 years now. But I still can't talk about it.
I know NDAs are horrifying, aren't they? I can't talk about stuff.
They are. But I'm working on. I've just started work on something else that's mine, and I can't talk to you about that either. But hopefully soon.
Well, thanks everyone for joining this fascinating discussion on what Dan can't tell us. Elise, do you have anything you can tell us?
I can talk about my project. So I have a manuscript right now that I am just beginning the process of querying. It's a fantasy novel, an adult fantasy in which there's a craft of painting, and the paints can be infused with emotions, and the emotions are then felt by anyone who looks at this painting. And then of course we have a young painter who gets dragged into a war in which that craft is weaponized, and he has to choose how he's going to use it to further his ambition or to heal his country. So
wow,
that's what I'm working on right now.
That sounds amazing. Okay. Oh, sorry. Sarah.
I'm working on another fantasy. I have not been able to encapsulate it as well as she just did at least just did on hers. Mine is it's basically a story of an angel who's fallen to earth, not really an angel, and he loses his wings, and he's in a World War I era setting. Second world fantasy though, and he has to have two atheist siblings help him regain his wings, and he ends up getting embroiled in a revolution against his own people as the humans of this world are trying to break free from their oppressive overlords. But
so light reading then.
Yeah, light reading.
All right.
I described it to someone and they said, so it's like Stardust meets Elysium. And I also want to throw in there meets All Quiet on the Western Front. So it's about war and PTSD and things like that.
It's nice when the blurb writes itself.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, so can you tell us anything about the two books that are on sub, or what you're moving on to next? Is that?
I won't. I just started a new project. I won't go into detail about the two on sub books. It just, I don't know.
No, fair enough. Absolutely fair.
But so I just started the very beginning stages of drafting a new book. It's kind of like I'm just coming up with these comps off the cuff, but it's kind of like Tales of the City meets Cloud Atlas. So it's set in San Francisco, where I live. Part of it definitely is a love letter to the city, and it follows three individuals who live in the city in three different time periods, and how it explores how they're connected. And it's about lineage and history and psychic powers, because I have a thing with powers. So. I'm in the very, very beginning stages of drafting that. This project is requiring probably the most research, or the most historical research that I've had to do. One of the storylines is set right before the 1906 earthquake in San Francisco's Chinatown.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm exploring the history of that neighborhood and what life, like just what daily life was like during that time. Yeah, and then one of the characters is a marine archaeologist. So I'm going to be hitting you up, Dan, to answer some questions. But so I started drafting that pretty much right on the heels of finishing the 8th draft of one of the books that I have out on sub now. And I'm realizing that my writing muscle maybe needs to rest a little bit. So I think that what I'm going to do for the next 6 weeks or so is catch up on reading,
Mm-hmm.
and get more just fill out my research a little more before I turn my attention back to drafting.
Okay. That sounds good. Yeah, I know sometimes there's this kind of urge. You think, you say, if I'm not writing every day, it's like, oh no. But actually, I think I like the idea that you're saying, no, I need to take a rest here. I'm just going to enjoy reading other things, bit of research, work on that, and actually just give yourself that break. Because I think sometimes there can be that, push to say, I've got to get words down today. Does anybody else have a sort of feel that? Like sometimes if you that you've got to force it, or you feel bad if you don't do it, or is that just me?
I mean, I did used to feel that, but like, I mean, I'm in a place now where I already have 2 books on sub, so it's like, if I quickly write this 3rd one, like, what's that going to do? Like,
you already bought yourself breathing room, didn't you?
More frustration. So yeah, so I'm just going to like take my time with this one. Anyway, sorry.
That's fair. Mostly in chat, we're seeing Dan getting heckled again by Rob.
By Rob, yeah.
Apparently, Dan can't swim,
Yeah.
and he's outed you and said that you are in fact writing Mr. Blobby's memoirs.
Yeah. Well, it was either that,
that
or
true?
Cats, the novelization.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God.
Forgot about cats.
I'm not reading that.
I'm not reading that either.
Good. I'm glad nobody should be reading that. Right. Okay.
I'm going to get AI to write it.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm going to get AI to write it.
Yeah. All right. So Dan, my question to you then is, since you started out in publishing, what do you think's changed? Has anything changed in general, but more specifically within science fiction, fantasy, horror genre?
I mean, it's difficult to know because, I can only see within my little silo and the people I connect with. It seems to be harder than ever before. And, that's what I'm hearing from people who are still querying, is that it's difficult. And, I think the month one of my books came out, it could have been Captain Moxley. And I launched with Chris Panettiere. And I think that month, because of the pandemic, all these books had been pushed. And so like 800 books came out that month.
Oh, wow.
And it's just like, oh, okay. You used to think, oh, I've got published, it's this really big deal. And 800 people had the same thing happen just this month. And I'm quite lucky to now be in publishing and we've talked about, you need to get to the next milestone and then the one after that, and we're still struggling with that. But I do feel kind of quite privileged that I made it through before it got extra tough. And I don't know if that's everyone else's experiences, but that's the feel I'm getting, that it just seems to be harder. And especially, in-house as well. I think the editors are probably overworked, and just the teams are having so much more to deal with these days. It just seems harder for everyone.
Okay, does anyone have anything cheery to add? No, I feel like
Sorry.
no, it's all.
I'm so new to publishing. I'm like, it's hard for me to say what it was like.
Okay,
well, maybe different now. Then, I'm like, I don't know.
Maybe the question should be then, and I'll open it up to anybody who wants to answer. Maybe trends then in publishing within the speculative fiction genre. Do you think there's a movement towards any particular trends, or what's popular right now?
I think the cozy stuff is kind of on the trend right now, and horror seems to be picking up again.
Okay.
Out there.
I think romantasy seems to be on the up as well, from kind of what I'm hearing, despite the fact that apparently some people on Twitter feel that romance does not belong in fantasy books. It should be a genre all by itself.
Well, I don't know. I mean, that's I like books that
don't send me hate mail.
Definitely standalones are seem to be, because it used to be like, if you don't have a series, what do you do? What are you even doing writing? But now I think a lot more fantasy standalones are out there, which is nice to see.
Yeah,
I think we're seeing self-publishing really come into its own as well. I mean, we're seeing some really, really good things, and then these things get picked up by publishers and then turned into TV shows. And I think people are really doing well in there, and there's probably a lot. I certainly could go and learn from those people and how they market themselves and how they put these things together. I mean, it takes an incredible amount of work to do that stuff. They are absolutely brilliant. And so I think maybe traditional publishing could look towards self-publishing for a few.
I think that's true as well. And if you look at like the Spiff Bowl winners of the last couple of years and things, it's things that traditional fantasy and stuff they would have said wouldn't have won, and they have. And I think that's sort of demonstrating there's perhaps an appetite out there for different things that if traditional publishers were looking at and pushed more, I think they would find an audience. And there's a lot of people I think there used to be personally, there used to, not from me, but that self-publishing was maybe a last resort, or people, they didn't make it there, so they did this. A lot of people are choosing to do that because they want to have that control, or because perhaps they have been told, no, there's not a market for this. And what we're seeing is that perhaps actually there is a market for it, if it's marketed in the right way. Thoughts on that, anybody?
I might be off on this observation. So I mean, like I not putting myself out there as an expert or anything, but I get the impression that the readership of indie published books only read indie published books. So I don't know. I'm like, and I too marvel at the ability of a lot of self-published folks to market themselves and promote themselves, and like trying to learn from that. But at the same time, it feels like they're talking to a whole different group of people than is even paying attention to what traditional publishing does. So it's like I feel like there are lessons to be learned, but they might be somewhat limited because the context and the market is completely different.
That's fair. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that's a fair point. Okay. Sorry, lots of chat flapping up here. Someone can say. Wilson Goodson has asked us to define what cozy fantasy is.
I've never read it. I only know just from the Legends and Lattes being like a boom, and all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, well, here's my cozy sci-fi. Here's my cozy mystery, cozy mystery. I don't know. I guess not blood and violence. It's not. And it's like sweet stories and the low stakes, I guess.
Yeah. Low stakes.
Low stakes.
Becky Chambers is a big example of cozy sci-fi.
Okay.
Yeah. So yes, low stakes, very focused on characters and their relationships more so than plot
like big world changing events that, yeah.
Right. Yeah. There's not going to be a huge twist at the end, kind of.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, happy ending, feel good about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's more about like being in the world and hanging out with those characters, and having a feel good kind of experience.
Mm-hmm.
I find when the world is going through horrible events, that those kind of novels resonate with people more. Like they seek out other world fantasies and things that are comforting, I suppose, and cozy.
Right.
And the world is kind of crappy right now.
Yes. So you can see why everybody's like, oh, something happy,
I need
please.
something happy. I need something sweet.
Yeah. Okay, Elise, question for you. So what are your thoughts about the rise of AI and how it's going to impact publishing? Do we think that the speculative fiction genre is more at risk than others, or is this just a problem generally?
Oh my goodness, opening on this one.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's
rest
all
of you
right.
have a think.
I have a few thoughts. I don't think they've been fleshed out extensively. Obviously, there's problems like with people suddenly thinking they can write a wonderful short story by asking AI to generate it for them with I don't even know how few prompts, and publishers getting overwhelmed with a deluge of terrible writing that was not written by a human. That's a problem. I don't have all the solutions for that problem. I did get excited when I heard another author share about some of the things that AI may be able to help authors with that isn't really their creative process at all, but such as helping write your synopsis that you hated writing anyway, or helping you write your marketing materials, which you would have rather pulled out your own teeth than write yourself. So I think that there are going to be places where it can be used as a tool, and a really useful tool. I just hope it's not going to be used to replace human creativity. And there is so much that humans can do that I don't know that AI is going to be doing anytime soon. So I'm kind of cautiously optimistic about it. That's what I can say.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, I kind of have a fear that I could see Amazon rubbing their hands here and going, great, we could just churn these out on a weekly basis and charge $2.99 for them. I'm a bit scared of that personally. Dan, thoughts?
I mean, at some point, how will we know? It's kind of interesting. I mean, I'm sure we've all read books that AI could probably write because they're kind of superficial. They might be quite fast paced. They hit all the right beats. There is a structure to storytelling. And when AI learns it, if it hasn't already, which I don't think it has, we could be hitting somewhere kind of challenging for us. But you can't beat human storytelling. There's always something a person is an insight, a feeling, an emotion that they're going to throw in that AI probably is nowhere near getting close to.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. But do some readers care?
Oh,
No. So that's the danger, I think. I think you're right in that, those of us who really treasure it are kind of like, that feeling, that emotion is there. But there's going to be people, pulp readers. I mean, I'll be honest, I love devouring fan fiction. It's a kind of like a stop for me, or sometimes I'll just go read something really mental online, and I find it quite cathartic. Sometimes it's absolute guff. Some of it's actually good, but some of it's guff. And you look in the comments and they're like, oh, it's the most amazing thing ever. And you're like, is it? But people love it, including me. I wouldn't pay for it. But, so is that, what you're saying is right, but is there still going to be a market for it? Sarah?
For AI, you mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think where it will right now at this level, I think it'll take over like all the little stupid little news stories that are badly written anyway, that have like typos and just the little bits and pieces you find on the internet. I could see the chat AI taking that kind of stuff over. Books, I don't think it's anywhere near that yet. I mean, I don't know enough about it, but I don't like that idea that that people there'd be an audience for it. It's a shame, because I mean, storytelling is part of humanity. I mean, it's the whole human history is storytelling. So it'd be a shame. I mean, it's not like people don't create the AI. They take their sources from people. It's not like these are, I mean, people misunderstand it. It's not like there's robots out there with human brains writing stuff.
No, I mean, they're just scraping,
it's
they're just
algorithms.
scraping the internet and taking
And
other
I'm
people's
like,
work and regurgitating it.
I don't find it as fearful for as far as fiction writing goes. Like it doesn't stress me out that much anymore. Like the art is interesting, it's neat, but it can't replace like true artists. I mean, I just don't. It's fine. It's something to look at, but there's always going to be a market for actual creatives, storytellers, you know, art people, artists.
Yeah, we hope. Khan, would you agree with that? And do you think that there's some genres are more at risk than others?
I think the most, as Sarah mentioned, the most at risk is probably like clickbait news articles, maybe advertising copy, that kind of thing. What I've noticed about the AI writing that I've looked at, which has not been extensive, but as far as fiction attempts, is that it's all telling and no showing. Like there's never scenes and stuff. And so that's a tell right there. And maybe a short story can get away with that, but not a whole novel. Might AI evolve to the point that it's indistinguishable? I mean, maybe from like an actual person's beautifully crafted book length fictional work? Maybe, I don't know. The thing is right now, how the AI works, like the AI doesn't actually know what it's saying. Like it scrapes the internet for every bit of writing that's out there.
Yeah.
But how it functions is by probability. Like it lays one word after the other according to, okay, if this word is here, then the probability that the next word will be X. And that's how it generates. It's kind of like a autocorrect on steroids. But the AI, but it doesn't know what those words mean. Like it does, you know, like it puts out something that is passably human language, but doesn't actually understand what it's saying.
Okay.
And I think with clickbaity BuzzFeed articles, it can pass, but for literature, it's not there. So that's what I think. A friend of mine described language models, not quite there yet, but described language models as being a language equivalent of calculators. And so like calculators and computers and the way and how quickly and how complex math things they can solve didn't put mathematicians or physicists out of business, but they helped them to do their work quicker and do more complex things. And I think that might be a healthy way of looking at language models, you know, as they develop.
Okay. Well, I'm liking the positivity. Okay, a wee question, guys. We're getting to the point where we're going to start thinking about wrapping up quite soon. So if you've got any questions, those of you on YouTube, make sure you put them in the chat so our tech can see it. I've got one here. How much of a problem is it to sell a cross-genre novel? I'm currently on send out for a novel with agents, and I would like to describe it as a domestic urban fantasy / chicklet. One or two agents have raised concerns about placing such a cross-genre book. Any tips or advice, or do I just keep sending it out?
That's a tough one, because I feel like some of the stuff I write isn't necessarily, I mean, it's fantasy, but there's elements to it, especially the one I'm working on now, elements to it that are not necessarily fantasy, and you can, you know, you can make it work. If the book works, it works.
Mhm.
But where you're going to place it is important to publishers. It's going to make a difference down the road, whether they can market it. And I guess my advice is, if you're set on that book and you want to get it out there, keep sending it out, but also give an idea of how it would be marketed, like where it would be on the shelf, what books, look at comp titles, look at what books it's similar to. Like fans of such and such will love this book too, you know, that kind of thing. I mean,
Mhm.
you know, it could be the most original thing out there, but you still, or the most unique thing you've ever seen, but you have to find other titles that are going to be similar, other books that are successful that you can point to and say, fans of that book will like this book.
Mhm. Yeah. Rob saying it's maybe, is it a cozy fantasy maybe? Would that be a selling point if you took in those sort of urban sort of fantasy chick lit? Would that be cozy? Could we market it that way? Maybe have a look at that online and see whether that fits.
Or
Anybody
fantasy
else?
romance type thing, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, if there's romantic elements to it, romance sells.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Just remember, if you're marketing it as romance, it has to have a happily ever after, happily for now, or your romance fans will hunt you down and kill
Yeah.
you.
That's right.
In a romantic way, of course. Any other thoughts on that one? Nope. Okay. Just see if there's any other questions.
For a whole bunch.
Okay. I think we're all right at the moment. Okay. Well, what I'd like to do then is get to my last question. And Khan, I'm going to start with you, which is, at the end of your career, what do you hope you'll have achieved? What's your legacy?
Gosh. I hope that well, first of all, I hope that I indeed have a career. one book.
I'm assuming you will. I'm assuming you will. That's good. That's a given.
I mean, I guess mostly I hope that to create an enduring body of work. I mean, it would be lovely to like have a bunch of awards and like movie adaptations and like all that stuff. But ultimately, even if none of that happens, if there are writers coming up who look to my books as inspiration, or use my books as comp titles, like if my books were made in print after I'm dead, like that would be great. But on the other hand, like I won't be around for any of that, so like but I mean, I guess that's what yeah.
I think, yeah. No, I think that's a positive way to look at it. I like that. Dan?
I'm looking forward to the $12 million that will help me along my way. I would just like to keep writing books that entertain people, and you know, write the kind of books that I often return to, and you know, can't stop thinking about. And they might not be the deepest, most literary, most epic stories out there, but they just strike a chord with me, and I enjoy them, and you know, I often go back. So if I can do that for a few more books, that'll be wonderful.
Mm-hmm. No, I like that sentiment as well. I mean, your big epic fantasies are great sometimes, but one of my favorite books for the last few years was Sword Heart, because it was just so lovely, and I enjoyed the characters and the world, and yeah, and I don't think anyone would describe that as a big epic fantasy book, but it really touched me, and like things like Legends and Lattes, and I love this whole different stuff that's coming out now, and I think you're right. I think sometimes those books that stick with you just for the wee moments are lovely. So that's a nice sentiment. Elise, what's your goal? What's your achievement going to be? If all goes right.
I think I would be very happy. So there's so much you can't control, right? There's so much you can't plan for and control and predict. But if I can have left behind some legacy of hope, of shining light to some degree in a world that really needs it, even of helping some reader, a handful of readers, feel seen and known. If it can bring some healing from grief is a big theme that I write about a lot, grief and loss, and kind of the path after that. If I can touch even a few lives with my writing, I think I will have done something good. And yeah, That's what I would hope for.
Mhm. Yeah, that's great. I like that too. All right, Sarah, say something deep and meaningful.
Okay, so my hope is that I don't have an end to my career, that I'm writing books up until the day I die, essentially. And that like Khan was saying, you build a work, you build a collection, and it's out there, it's in print, people read your books. I'd like to think that, some 12-year-old girl is going to pick up my book and be like, I want to write this kind of stuff, or this is, this is my dream too. And because that's how I felt when I was that age. It's like the idea of meeting an author, it was just, oh my God, it would have been such a dream for me at that age. So I'd like some kid to read my book and feel that way, Yeah. But yeah, I would like to not have an end of my career. Be the one book. I'd like to go from here and keep writing and writing and writing.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, no, great answers all. We hope to have long careers. Some money would be nice, but fundamentally we hope that our work lasts and that we touch people with it. So yeah, no, absolutely fantastic. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just get you guys go again round, just sort of say where we can find your books, anything you want to tell us as a wee kind of closing argument, and then I shall do some bump about Glasgow 2024 and we'll let you escape. So Sarah.
Oh, me again.
You again.
Again, Obsidian, although it's backwards. It's available in all major bookstores, Barnes & Noble, Amazon. It's also nominated, it's in finalist for the Compton Crook Award, which is best debut fantasy novel that the Baltimore Science Convention.
Can people vote for it?
Yeah, people will vote for it. Though I'll find out in April.
Okay.
I'm one of 6 finalists or 5. Anyway.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Dan.
Well, you can find my books at most major bookstores,
including Barnes and Noble,
and especially Barnes and Noble, who I love. But go and order them from your local independent bookstore if you can. If you're interested in any of our books, we need to support our high street bookstores. And yeah, other than that, I can't tell you. Sorry.
Anyway.
It's all secretive. He's gone secretive again.
I know. Sorry.
Can.
So my book is The Circus Infinite, and I'm scrolling through my phone looking for a shot of the cover.
It's not your screensaver. Come on, man.
When you were booting
it was for a long time. It was for a long time, but then I felt. Then after a year, I was like, maybe it's time for something new now. But so here's. That's the poster from my book launch party at the Circus.
Oh, cool.
So it's The Circus Infinite. It is available wherever books are sold. But if you need to order it online, I recommend going through bookshop.org or your local and your favorite independent bookseller. Barnes and Noble has been terrific, so go there too. I just found out that it is a finalist for the Lambda Literary Award for LGBTQ plus speculative fiction. It's an award that's been given annually for, I think, 35 years or so, across all genres. So my book is a finalist in the speculative fiction category, which is very exciting. And I find out in June if it.
Wait till June.
If it wins or not. Yeah. There's an award ceremony that's happening in New York that I think I'm gonna actually go to. Mm-hmm. So
more waiting though.
Yeah,
all the waiting.
Always waiting.
But at least this waiting has a definitive.
That's true.
Right.
That's true. There's a deadline for this. You know when it's going to happen. That's very true.
Right. Yeah. So that's me.
Okay. And Elise.
I am Elise Stephens. This is one of my books, which you can find online. So this is a small press, so I am not in all the bookstores yet. You would probably have to find me on Amazon, but I'll also drop my author website into the chat in case anyone wants to go look more, see my short stories. I've got a bunch of those linked there as well, and many of them you can read for free. So yeah.
And you can find more about all of our panelists tonight if you look in the description on the YouTube channel. All of their links, etc., bios and everything are on there. So please go do look try that again. Please do go and look there to find more about our lovely panelists, Sarah J. Daley, Dan Hanks, Khan Wong, and Elise Stephens. Thank you so very much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. Coming up in Glasgow 2024 is we have on the 24th of April, we have our Chinese SFFH panel. We have the 16th of May, we have our 1-star reviews panel. If you want to join us for a game of fake or real, you can do that then. And then in June, we have our Lord of the Rings fandom event, and hopefully coming up in July, date to be confirmed, we're looking at drugs in science fiction and fantasy. So those are our upcoming events. Can I encourage you to go to our Redbubble shop? You will again find the link in our description on YouTube. Go and buy some lovely merch, which I'm going to model now.
Woohoo!
Okay, we have lots of t-shirts and hoodies and various other things, and like computer mats and all your kind of usual nonsense there. So please do that. Also, to let you know that we will have a table at EasterCon, which funnily enough is at Easter. So we'll come in there. We'll also have a virtual table. If you're not going to be there, you can come and bug us online as well. So please do that. If you're looking to get more involved, we're always looking for volunteers. You can find it all about volunteering on our website, or you can message me on Twitter or whatnot. Also to say that if our prices are rising for Glasgow 2024 at the end of April. So if you're thinking of coming, good to get your tickets sooner rather than later, because the price rises do keep going up. End of April is our next one, so please think about doing that. I'd also encourage you to look on our YouTube channel at our Indie Author Reading Library, where lovely small press authors and indies are sharing some of their readings with us. And upcoming very, very soon will be our Meet the Author series, where all of our authors get asked 10 some ridiculous, some worthwhile questions to find out a little bit more about them. Okay, so just to say one more time, thank you very much to all our guests. What a brilliant chat, some great advice, and we know that people watching have really appreciated that, and I very much do as well. So thank you very much again, and we'll see you very, very soon.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Oh, my hand's
Bye,
disappearing, that's
everyone.
creepy.